Hey friends, welcome to the new Next Level. I'm your host, Heidi Mitro, and today we're continuing our conversation around race and racism and social justice. And hold on just a second, sweetie, I forgot to record. Okay, friends, you're gonna get our take two. Are you ready? Here we go. Hey friends, welcome. I'm Heidi Mitro with the new Next Level, and we are continuing our conversation about race, racism, and social justice. And my beautiful, magical partner, husband, best friend, sweetheart is joining us. And we today are going to be talking about being offensive. So, holy hell. So, welcome, Michael, Mikey. How
Thank
are
you.
you?
I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm
Good.
okay. I feel like we got to this point with this topic. We kind of had to circle around for a while before we landed. And
hmm
for those of you that know us as the Mitros, you know that we're a pretty active family. And one of the things that Mike and I share as a value is movement. And we go for walks every day, actually. Um, and that seems to be when we talk about our topics and what we want to share. And yesterday we were talking about like, okay, man, what are we gonna talk about? And I think it took us a little bit to land,
hmm
but what's I think been showing up for both of us is this idea about being offensive and what
Yeah,
does that mean? And so without further ado, lay it on me, man. What do you think about being offensive?
I think there's a difference between being offensive and having a uncomfortable conversation like we've been talking about for the last month and a half or so or longer, depending on the context of the conversation.
Hmm.
But having an uncomfortable conversation with the goal being progress and movement versus being offensive to start an argument or being offensive for the sake of being offensive, to
Hmm.
stir up controversy or just to in general be an ass. So um,
And by the
and I,
way, if you've got kiddos, there may be some swearing happening. So throw on some headphones or adult language warning, I guess is what I want
yeah,
to
and
say.
and that's not just to be offensive to be offensive. It's to a point. So there's that's where kind of where that difference lies for me. So
Right. I think that's well said. I don't think you've said it like that before,
mm,
which is what I love about these conversations. Like, this isn't meant to be a definitive, Heidi, no, or are experts on race or racism or being offensive or social media or those types of things, but it is like a real couple having real conversations from two different points of view, male, female, black, white. I think we have a lot more in common than we don't, which I think is
mm,
pretty true straight across the board on
yeah.
the planet. I think we all have way more in common than we don't.
hmm
But I know the people that are reaching out to me are typically white women, specifically in the coaching industry, because that happens to be where I play and live. And the big fear is being offensive. The big fear is like, now that racial injustice is forefront again, now that it's activated, what's
hmm
my role? And so many of these women are very well-meaning and incredibly insightful, but there is a fear of being offensive. And
Okay.
so I'm curious. I know what I said on repeat, which is another reason I wanted to have this conversation, but what would you say to white people right now who are worried about being offensive?
I would say that if you're worried about being offensive, then you're probably moving you're moving in the right direction. Like if you're concerned about what people's perception will be, then I think it's that whatever that the the statement is or the contribution is worth having if you're worried about it. If you're not worried about it and if you're not thinking about um, what the perception will be and you're just pushing it out without any thought behind it, then chances are that it probably will be perceived as offensive across the board. And with that being said, there are going to be people who are offended. That is not anything that we have control over, and it's also not a reason not to participate in the conversation. Like I said, I think if your intention is to be part of the process and part of the solution, and again, there are caveats to all of these things, but from a general purpose, it's it is better to be part of the conversation, and even if it's not 100% on message, putting it out there, being okay with critique and feedback and criticism is all part of the process. But not saying anything has not worked ever, and it's gotten us where we are. And I think, but everyone has that voice. Everyone, I don't care who you are, everyone has that voice. But at some point, the other people's perception is out of our control, and so then you move along with the conversation.
Well, and I think that I like that when you're talking about, like, if you're feeling like it might be offensive and you're nervous about it, that's actually an indication of moving in the right direction. That it means that you're discerning, it means that you're thinking about it, you're giving more careful attention.
Yep.
And I also think that our discomfort threshold is and has to increase.
Yeah, it's really low right now for a lot of people.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, that is a place of privilege where discomfort is a choice. And I know for me, moving forward in the conversation and wanting to be a part of the solution, there is an element of, am I doing enough? What does that look like? How do I serve in a different capacity? And what I'm doing for my own self and what I'm advising, especially within the coaching industry, is you have got to know without a doubt what your values are. And if you can come back to them and you can know that you are aligned, then when you get feedback, when someone is offended, you still have the foundation and the stability of going forward from an aligned place. And I find that when I'm aligned, I'm actually more willing to be redirected. It's when I'm making choices that are not aligned with values and someone says something that I feel like I'm twisting in the wind, right? Like I feel like I just got completely blown away. I still don't I think there's a difference between critique and criticism. And I think we need to be able to do both. But I find that if you are going to be quiet or risk being offensive, I'm going to encourage you to risk being offensive from a place of learning, from a place of risk, from a place of being a part of the conversation versus being quiet.
Well, and what was the quote about criticism and not taking it personally, but taking it seriously?
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And so I think and that does require a level of self-awareness and the ability to separate the message from the person.
The message from the messenger.
Right. Being able to separate those things out and then taking that information and repurposing your message if it's in fact like a valid critique or criticism.
And I think that there's
name calling is not a valid critique or criticism. And so
right. And I think that there's that self-reflection matters. And I think it also matters for you to be able to regulate on a physiological basis. Like if someone were like, Heidi, you're a total bitch, I'd be like, okay. I mean, even saying that out loud, I used to give this example and I would make myself blush, like, oh God, am I? Now it's like, I really know that I'm not. Like I feel really aligned. If someone would be like, Heidi, you are blonde, I'd be like, what are you talking about? But I also think the level at which you agree with someone being unkind to you or someone pointing something out is yours to deal with on a physiological basis. And most of us are so disconnected from our bodies that we stay in reactive mode all the time, which is why we are offended the way that we are. There's a physical response. Like even some of the people who are trying to be controversial, even the people who are whipping shit up just to be relevant in a backwards way. And that to me is attention seeking. But what I've learned with parenting, and I can't remember where I read this, if you know this, please give me the resource, but it's talking about when you're saying to yourself, like, oh, my kids are displaying attention seeking behaviors. If you can shift it to they are displaying connection seeking behaviors. I think the same is true as adults.
Yep.
That because we are so disconnected, first and foremost from ourselves and from our planet and from each other, it's easier to be offensive or cruel or unkind because like of the disconnect. The disconnect is the symptom, or the offensive, intentionally unkind asshole behavior is actually ironically a connection seeking behavior.
Right. It's a temper tantrum is what,
it just happens to be a temper tantrum with adults who have means and can be violent and can be forceful and powerful. And it's ironically, it is so hard to be like, it takes a lot of restraint, in my opinion, to be nonviolent. It's much easier to be a dick. It's much easier to be an asshole. It's much easier to just like tell somebody to fuck off. It is.
And
I feel like you should get a medal at the end of the day for not freaking out.
Yeah, I know. I've seen. I'll have to see if I can find it. The meme about the guy laying on the couch with his arm over his head, exasperated. Like, I feel like I should get a trophy for not committing, murder today. And it's real. Like, it does require. It's a skill. Self-regulation is a skill set. It falls in line again with that self-awareness. And we see, you see examples of it on a regular basis, due to the convenient access to technology that allows those moments to be captured in forever, and it has consequences. Your actions have consequences, and so it behooves us all to have some sort of like stop sign before you lose your shit at Walmart or at Target or on the hiking trail or at a dog park. Like, take a step back and think all the way through, just like the emotion, the response to your emotions. Like, think it all the way through, feel it all the way through. What is going to happen on the other side of this interaction? I'm probably not going to win out on this one, like. And
that does require having the basic knowledge of your physiology. Like,
yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, there's a physical response. We all have it. It's evolutionary. It's designed to protect us, but from what now? Like, it doesn't serve the purpose that it did, 10,000 years ago.
Right.
And right now what seems to be happening is that response is manifesting itself in like personal attacks, and it's ugly, and I think it's necessary. Like, I just want to go back to election night 2016 for a minute, not to relive this for anyone, but I mean, like, literally, like, I remember going upstairs and going to bed and waking up the next morning and still being like, huh? And you're like, well, I think this is a good thing. Like, I think this is gonna, let me finish.
I know.
But you're like, it's gonna, all of these things that we're worried about that are just under the surface are now going to come out. And it, 4 years later, here we are, like, or 3.5 years later, here we are. It is out and on the surface and in your face. And now more than ever, I think people have to have, it's not an option to phone it in emotionally and physically for yourself anymore. Like, you have to have.
Of course it's an option. I'm going to disagree with you.
Okay, you can disagree with me, but I think for the purposes of the survival of our democracy, for instance, I think it's necessary for people to take some responsibility, I guess.
I agree with the responsibility part. I also think that a lot of people are not going to be comfortable not phoning it in. I don't know how many negatives.
I know, and I'm not, and I may have offended some people, and that's okay.
Right.
where I'm going. So
Right. But I think for me, and I remember election night, and I remember, I
I had a
remember that
client that night
conversation.
until 6 o'clock, and she
Mhm.
was leaving the studio to go to an election night party with all of her girlfriends.
Yep.
They were so excited.
Yep.
And then the next day it was just, anyway, yeah, that I think is one of those where were you when you'll remember where you were when, you know.
And wherever you are on either side of that, some people were ecstatic, some people were devastated. And to
Absolutely.
me, that is still, it's a physiological response of living outside of yourself.
Hmm.
And that election was a catalyst where it was like, wait a second, no matter where you fall on who you support, and I have a lot of opinions on that, which, I don't know that this is the place for that. Maybe it will be
Right.
eventually. But I remember thinking, like, within the context of my own relationship with myself, I know who I am. In the context of our family, I know who I am. There isn't going to be anybody that's coming into my home and saying, you got to do XYZ. No one,
Hmm.
there still is an element of personal freedom. There still is an element of I am the leader of myself and I can
Yeah.
check my physiology. But I also believe anytime that there has been a perceived negative, when we were going through, hell with the housing crisis, when we were going through the hell of like, oh my God, we are not exempt from like the economy.
Hmm.
I still believe who are you when it sucks is a really fantastic way to live, or a
Yes.
fantastic way to respond. Who are you when it gets tough? And I really am proud of myself for who I am when it sucks, where I believe that those are opportunities for you to double down on your values, for you to double down on who you know yourself to be.
Yep.
And if I come from a place of alignment and I offend someone, it's easier for me to navigate it and go, oh yeah, I fucked up on that. Or actually, no, this is my opinion. And I think you
Hmm.
and I have enough relationships with people on different ends of the political spectrum
Hmm.
where some people are just so staunch on their right left side, there's no room to talk. But
Yep.
I know that you and I have, especially, I mean, there's a couple in particular where we're not aligned politically, but we have so much more in common and we're able to have conversations that are difficult, and we're
Hmm.
able to disagree from a place of respect. And it isn't about convincing, but it is about enlightening. Like, why, where are you coming from? Why do you feel that way? Is a different response than fuck you, I hate you, and your
Yep.
family. Like,
Yep.
that's not where I will engage. That isn't an engaged place.
No.
But having women reach out and they're like, Heidi, I'm nervous, or what do I say? Or I always say to them, like, I'm glad that you reached out. I'm glad that you're having this train of thought. I'm proud that this is painful
Hmm.
for you. Let's not stay here. Let's deepen. Right? That's the
Sure.
new next level, is we deepen our relationship first and foremost with ourselves. It is the work.
Hmm. 100%.
Do you feel offended easily? I don't know that I've ever asked you that question. Are you easily offended?
I don't think so.
Hmm.
No.
Why not?
Um,
What do
I
you
think
attribute that to? Huh? I've never asked you that question before.
I feel like there are certain interactions or certain um, messages that I know aren't coming from a place of alignment. And
Hmm.
so it's not about me, and it's more about the
Hmm.
individual. It's more about the messenger than the actual message. And so
I think that's
I
a
can
great distinction.
I have I feel like I have the ability to discern what the intention behind that is, or where the origin of that is coming from.
Hmm.
And then I can say, you know what, that's not worth engaging, because I'm not going to be able to, influence or have a conversation with that person or that messenger. And so it's
Hmm.
not worth the time or engagement. And I think that's the unfortunate part of our online culture, is that it's easy to get drawn in. It's easy to get pulled into the unaligned or out of alignment messaging, and then you get
Mhm.
pulled into the conversation, and you get pulled into,
Well, it's not even a
responses.
conversation, right? It's like a
It's
shouting
yeah,
match.
it's a
Yeah.
virtual shouting match, and so no one is ever going to have their opinion changed in an environment like that. All
Right.
that does is reinforce your defense mechanism, and it reinforces your I don't know. It just makes it more difficult, and
It
so
crystallizes
those
your original position.
right. It proves you right. Like, see
Mhm.
what I'm saying about this person is true, versus a face-to-face dialogue. I think more often than not is significantly more beneficial.
And I think of
And
that as like an act of rebellion right now. Like
a
actually
face-to-face
having,
dialogue.
yeah, like I think having a relationship with someone, which I think is why for me, where I believe that I can be of service, that's in alignment with my values and my goals and my purpose, is talking with other leaders, and not leaders from like a pedestal place of like, this is what you should do, but leaders who are like, how can I contribute to a conversation? How can my gifts and talents serve at a higher level or a deeper level?
Yeah.
And I've reckoned with this, especially over the last couple of weeks, of like, am I not offensive enough? Am I not controversial enough? Have I not taken a harsh enough stance to get trolls and haters? You know what I mean? Where it's like, and I also think you and I have identified this about ourselves. Like we genuinely do want to be the bridge.
Yep.
When you can bring people together and not to avoid uncomfortable conversations. There are times where I'm like, ooh, shit, this is a landmine. If I step one more foot into this, nothing's going to get accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying not to insulate myself where I'm not like I don't want to insulate, but I also don't want to instigate. Like the call out culture, the cancel culture. I think you miss an opportunity when you cancel people so fast. And some people are just assholes, and some people are out for, hurting people, and some people are out for destruction. And I'm not talking to the white supremacists, and I'm not talking to the people who have been in the conversation way longer and have a different language. I
Mm-hmm.
can speak to where I'm at. And
Yep.
we all can start where we're from. Like you can start where you are, but
Yeah.
you've got to be willing.
It works both ways, right? Like you have to be willing. If you're the bridge, you have to be willing to meet people where they are. Not everyone is going to be at the same spot on the continuum. We talked about
Right.
this, this continuum, and you did a beautiful illustration there of, on this end are the clan people, and on this end are the people who have been engaged in this conversation from the beginning, from day one, their entire lives. And then there are the folks in the middle, and they are even at different. That middle is pretty vast, but
Right.
those folks who are willing to engage in the conversation and participate in like the not education, but like the information, informative conversations around topics of race and gender and sexuality and all those things. Like that is where the magic happens. Like
Well,
we
I
can
think that
bring people into those conversations from a accepting standpoint.
right. And I think
Much
like
more productive.
as of this recording, we're 5 or 6 weeks out from when George Floyd was killed.
Mm-hmm.
And it is now, the news is starting to shift back to global pandemic and the controversy about masks. So whenever you're listening to this, that's the context of the time frame that we're in.
Yep.
And what I'm noticing is like it's starting to die down with a certain part of the population. It's like, yeah, we'll just kind of go back to business as usual.
Yep.
And I think the point of these conversations between you and I is like, ooh, yeah, we're not doing that, man. Like there is no, for you and I and our circle, our sphere of influence, business is not going back.
Right.
And so for me, my purpose, my goal, my passion is to continue the conversation, to continue to be the bridge so that there is a section of the population that goes, ooh, I'm teetering, and I'm speaking mostly to white people here. I'm teetering on like, I can just kind of go back to my pandemic lifestyle, which is even fucking crazy to say, or I can continue to engage. And so you and I are going to continue these conversations because not to like stir the pot, but to, well, maybe to stir the pot, to continue bringing people in, because the more the people in the middle who from a place of privilege have a choice, we need more people to choose to stay engaged. We
Yes.
need to provide a safe place. Safe is relative. To provide a place for people to continue the conversations, to continue to be uncomfortable from a place of progress and not perfection, right?
Yeah.
That was a messy way to say it. What did you hear me
But
say?
I do like progress and not perfection, because that perfection, you know,
That's
another
not my
one of
phrase.
those.
I don't remember who said that. So if you know, write it in the comments or send us an email who said
Well, I
progress.
mean,
and perfection.
I talk about that from a fitness and a health context prior to these conversations with my clients,
Right.
where it's like, you're never ever going to hit that perfection. Like there's always room for improvement. And so it is about, if you're striving for perfection, you're going to make yourself crazy.
Right.
And it applies here as well.
And you'll be paralyzed. You probably won't do anything.
Yep. But if you can strive for progress instead, incremental change is way more sustainable than, you know, bam, or, you know, nothing. So
Right.
striving for progress, striving for incremental change, incremental enlightenment, whatever you want to, however you want to describe it, it is.
I think at the root, it's connection. Like when I'm fully connected to myself, I actually eat better.
Yep.
When I'm connected to myself, I'm able to have tough conversations with a thicker skin. When I feel connected to you, I know our household runs better. When I feel connected to our kids, the expression of their emotions is easier to navigate. When I feel connected to our community, I feel safer here, right?
Yeah.
And to me, it truly is connection. And being offensive from a place of like, oh, I'm going to just like mess with you, is to me a sign of disconnection. And so when that shows up, my immediate response now is like, okay, something's stirring for me. I got to come home and get connected first before I engage.
Yep.
Sometimes that takes me a week, where it's like, nah, if I talk to you, I'm going to like have that sharp tongue that, what's the rule in our house? Don't make it worse, right? Like if you're going to make it worse, shut your mouth. That's where we're at. But
and it's not, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. That's not it. It's
right.
Like the Bambi's mom didn't quite have it, or who was it? Thumper's mom.
I don't know.
Who said it?
Anyway, I have no idea.
One of those.
Is this a Disney reference?
Yeah, to Bambi. Wasn't it Thumper's mom, I think?
If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all.
Don't say anything at all.
I think my rule of thumb, and that's, you're not supposed to say rule of thumb anymore either. I can't keep track of all the shit I'm not supposed to say. Anyway, at the risk of being offensive. Yeah. You're welcome. But there's for me, it's, I don't want to engage until I have my physiology at least somewhat under control, because I know myself well enough that when I'm pissed or I'm hot, that's how I experience it physiologically, that my tongue is sharp. And at my core value of connection, I really don't want to eviscerate you with language. Sometimes I really do, Mike. Like when I'm disconnected from you or I'm disconnected from myself, and we are, I mean, we don't fight. We have disagreements, but we don't yell at each other. That's not how we operate. Mostly I think our fighting mechanism is like, be quiet. But that took me some time. And I don't want to offend you, but I also don't want to protect you from something that you actually may need to hear. But that requires that I'm in alignment with my own physiology.
Yeah.
What are you looking at?
My water bottle.
You look like you're
thirsty.
Hilarious. So what's your tactic? Because I don't think I think as we've grown up together, because that's how I view it.
Yeah.
That there
I
were
have
times
to,
where we tried to protect each other from our feelings, right? At the risk of being offensive.
mhm. I have to, I also have to like, our brains work differently. And so I have to like recalibrate and gather my thoughts before I'm able to have a constructive conversation when we're having a disagreement. And so now we, it's taken us,
20 years.
to figure that out. But now knowing that we, what we know about the way that each of us processes and each of us, each of our brains work, I know myself well enough to know that I can't just dive into it. I have to like organize my thoughts a little bit when we're having a disagreement.
Well, and
And
organize your
so,
physiology, right? Like your thoughts help you to figure out where in your
uh,
body
and
you're activated.
and quite frankly, it's easier when I'm moving.
Me too.
So, and I think that also has taken some time to figure out. So, but yeah, I mean,
And
movement.
connection takes time, right? Like I think that's the part about like being offended or being offensive or online culture is it's so quick.
Mhm.
Like you don't have
It's
to
reactive.
commit. It's reactive. And being response able, right? Like being able to respond. Sometimes responding means that you don't.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's like this conversation is going nowhere. No
Hmm.
one, all this is doing is crystallizing opinions. And I find that if I engage on social media in a power struggle, like I don't want to be in a power struggle. That isn't how I want to spend my time.
Yeah,
And
that's giving people, individuals more power over your mental state than they should have,
right.
honestly.
And
Um,
I think then it comes back to like coming back to yourself. Where can you actually make an impact? And within that circle, if you say something that's offensive, if you are speaking from a place of lack of experience or lack of interaction or lack of awareness, it becomes a more fertile ground where like if I were to say something to you that was offensive, you know my intention, you know who I am, and you'd be able to say like, Hides, that sucks, man. Like, what are you doing? Like, that's
mhm.
offensive.
Yeah,
And we would be in a place to have that dialogue, which matters.
yep,
And I believe that that's what we're trying to create on a different
yep.
scale, and that does not include Facebook or
No,
Instagram or Twitter. Those types of wars are exhausting.
yeah, I would agree.
And if you are in a position of leadership and you have a choice between being quiet or having the intention of bringing the conversation to the next level, risk being offensive.
Hmm.
Go for it. Someone will course correct you. I think that the takeaways as we wrap here, like there's a difference between the message and the messenger.
Yep.
And there is a difference between reacting and responding. And
Hmm.
there is a difference between being called out and being called up.
Yep.
Someone's calling you out to call you an asshole, or someone's like, hey, Heidi, the rule of thumb is an offensive thing to say. My physiology, I don't like to get it wrong. I like to be wrong. I don't like to be like,
What?
yeah, I don't like how that feels. And I can metabolize that enough to go, okay, I can change.
Hmm.
And that matters, I think. Called out and called up are different. So there's your takeaways.
Agreed. Yeah.
What are yours? Or what do you want to add to that or take away from that?
I think it's twofold. One is you're never going to get it 100% right. And so if that's what you're waiting
Mm,
for before you participate in the conversation, you're going to be waiting forever. And
right.
so get it as, make craft whatever your message is. If it happens to be, a blog post, a post on whatever, like it's never be 100% right.
Mm-hmm.
And to not participate in the conversation until it is, um, that I think that's doing everyone a disservice if you have a voice to that you want to add to the conversation. And the other thing is like there is definitely a difference between being offensive for the sake of being offensive and then because you are sharing a message that makes other people uncomfortable, and other people's comfort or lack their or feeling uncomfortable is not offensive, right? Like that is how you know
Mm.
that you've had an impact. That's how you know that your message has landed on some level. And
Yeah,
so,
offensive versus discomfort. Great point.
yep, people should be uncomfortable right now, and they should continue to be uncomfortable. If they're offended by it, then they're not quite ready to hear the message yet, and that's not your fault, and that's not your problem. You can still making people uncomfortable is how shit changes.
I love that point so much, Mike. Like I'm thinking about it in terms of if I see something and my thought is, God, that I'm offended by that. What
Mhm.
if we what if we shifted that out of like, wow, that makes me uncomfortable and got really curious about why? I
So,
feel
for
like,
instance,
yeah, go ahead.
well, like I posted something about um, the evolution of lynching in America last
Mhm.
weekend, and the idea that people took body parts as a souvenir makes people uncomfortable,
Oh,
right?
honey.
And it should,
Right.
right? Versus I'm offended by that, and no one had, I haven't had that interaction, but I'm just saying I'm sure people were offended by that because because it made them uncomfortable. But the difference between offense and uncomfortable is when you're uncomfortable and you identify it that way, that tells me that you're thinking about why it makes you uncomfortable. If you're offended, it's just I
It
don't want
shuts
to
it
talk about
down.
it. Yep,
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it because I'm offended. But that's
That's a
not a
super good point.
self-examination.
Right.
So,
And I think it's still worth examining being offended. But I think if you can start from the place of that makes me really uncomfortable and why, and then it's self-reflection, and then it's be social media can become a fertile ground for self-exploration. It can be like
sure.
when I follow this person and I'm following people that I've never followed before who are saying really, in my mind, from a white girl from a small town, like controversial shit. I'm like, oh my God, what are they doing?
Hmm.
And I get uncomfortable. And it's like, why does that make me uncomfortable? What is revealing itself to me about myself? What do I need to learn? Who's got the skill set to teach me what I need to know? That's a different place than I'm offended, case closed. Now I'm even more staunch in my position. We have
Hmm.
to be willing to be, the word I use in my coaching practice is curated. Like you're not meant to like be born with a certain set of like shit that you're taught and then die with the same set. What a wasted life. I
Yeah.
hope that offends you. I hope that makes you uncomfortable. Like you are meant to evolve and grow and like move it along. Mike, that's a really beautiful point. I'm gonna play with that. That's gorgeous. Thank you. I love it. Cool, friends. So we are going to be continuing these conversations, maybe in a little different format, but we're going to be posting all of this to the new podcast that's going to be rolling out here, the new Next Level. And we're going to be having conversations on the monthly together about race, keeping the conversation going. And so if this is like exciting to you, if this is helpful to you, we really, really do want to know. And as the podcast rolls out, we would love for you to leave a review of it. We'd love for you to like share it with all your friends. And if you are watching this live, please do leave comments. We will respond to every single one of them. So Mike, thank you for your time and insight. And I love that we can like come up with a topic and then see where it goes. And
Yeah.
I learned from you today. Like I learn from you every day, but I love that we get to do this. I'm grateful for you. Thank you.
I'm grateful for you too. This is um, it's definitely a interesting, like very involved and um, fumbling here because I'm not sure what the word is, but it's like I feel like it's allowed us to kind of delve deeper into a little bit more of our individual experiences that
Mhm.
we wouldn't normally talk about at, at this level.
It's allowed us to go new next level as individuals and as a
Yeah, and
couple
as a
and as a
couple.
family.
Yeah.
Thank you, sweetie. Hold on, I'm gonna like fade us out and I'll be right there. So
All
thanks for
right.
joining us, friends. We appreciate you. Stay tuned as the format shifts here. But we really genuinely appreciate you joining us, and we will talk with you very, very soon.
Bye.
Bye.